Greetings to everyone. I am Crescent, and I would like to introduce a new series I am calling Yugioh to Life. This new series will be about my journey in 3D printing Yu-Gi-Oh inspired props. I've loved the idea of 3D printing since the technology was properly commercialized. However, I wasn't happy with the quality of prints on the initial release. Many years have passed and I see things have improved immensely. Now that I am in possession of good 3D printers, I am ready to bring 3D to life in a whole new way. For this first episode, I will be creating this amulet from the card Droll and Lockbird. How fitting for my channel if I do say so myself. The reason I chose this prop is because I wanted to cosplay as the character Droll for YCS Minneapolis 2022. I thought it would be a good test to see if I could do it on a whim. Let's get to it. We start the process with creating the 3D model. I am very fortunate that not only do I have a perfectly aligned forward-facing image of the amulet, but I have a second image from the alternate artwork displaying an even more detailed amulet than the first one given. Lucky me. We begin by laying out the base frame along with some of the more notable features. Using the Boolean tool, I am able to cut shapes out of the base. Normally, I struggle with this tool because it can cause random vertices to appear in places I wouldn't want them to be. However, poly count isn't going to matter much when I know the final product is for 3D printing. Now, I'll add some more features such as these extrusions here. Man, look at all these polygons that would normally be awful to work with. Hehehe. Oh well. It's looking pretty good now. It's time to perform a new action that is specifically for 3D printing. After merging everything into one solid piece, I needed to slice this thing into multiple objects so I can print it off in the most optimal way. The way I see it, slicing it into 3 objects seems best. Having the front and back separated would give me flat surfaces to lay the 3D object on. This is so no supports would be needed and would save me time on sanding as well as save me some plastic. The third piece is just the spike. It doesn't have too much detail on it, so it wouldn't be too difficult to refine later. Now we get into the action. By importing the completed objects into my 3D printing software, I am able to make some final printing adjustments such as the final size, wall thickness, and the infill, which is adjusting how much inner support I want there to be. Alright, here are all the layers the printer will follow. It looks fine to me. I save these new files into a USB and bring them over to my printer. This is where the magic happens. I go ahead and prepare by inserting the gray PLA plastic and preheat the base plate. One trick that I learned from a friend is that I could use a glue stick to help keep the initial base of the print on the heated plate. I've had some issues with this in the past on other prints. I hit start and I let it do its thing. I start off with the front piece. This one took around 13 hours to print. The back piece was next, and this one took around 11 hours. Lastly, the spike took around 2 hours. Now that that's done, it's time for the next step. Sanding. Oh boy, did I learn how hard PLA is to sand from this project. Now, I started off with low grit sandpaper, wrapped around a sanding block so I could get in tight corners. Later on, I used this handy metal file that I had laying around to get a lot of the corners rounded out. It is quite old and rusted. I might pick up a nice new set of these later on as it was quite useful to have. Now that everything is sanded, for the first time, it is time to bring it all together, literally. For this project, since the plastic I use is PLA, I decided that welding the pieces with a soldering iron was my best bet. By melting the plastic around the entire edge and fusing the pieces like so, it would be almost impossible for them to break apart. What is handy about this method is that I'm also able to use the soldering iron to smooth away any hard bumps I come across, meaning less sanding for later. For the spike, I use this rotary tool with a sanding bit to shave away a good chunk of plastic to make sure the piece would fit properly. Once I had it to where I was satisfied, I went ahead and welded it together. Alright, good progress. Let's take it outside for the next step. I go ahead and suspend the amulet on a bungee cord and apply a coat of filler primer. Specifically a filler primer. This specific primer expands a bit when it dries. This would mean that after I sand it again, it would fill in some of the bumps I could not sand earlier, smoothing out the results. After it fully dries, we take it back inside and give it a last bit of sanding needed. This time, I believe I used a higher grit of sandpaper because the primer filler is much more easy to remove than the plastic was. After this layer, I gave it another pass with an even higher grit of sandpaper to really get the smoothness I wanted. This is great! We are getting so close to completion! Nothing can stop me now! It is now time to use my airbrush to apply the paint and... Wait, was that a spray can? Ah! 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 What are you doing past me? You're applying paint from a spray can! On all our hard work! That paint is oil-based! You fool! You absolute fool! You've doomed us! Ah! So here is the issue that I learned the hard way. The idea was to apply a coat of paint as the bottom layer to fill in all the gaps I could possibly miss, along with giving it a bit of shading variation when I go in for the top layer of paint via the airbrush. What I didn't know was the airbrush uses water-based paints. Airbrush paints are very malleable in a way. You could easily mix colors together, apply paint thinner to adjust the texture, even add metallic effects with special paints. It is also easy to clean, which is nice because you have to clean your airbrush after every session. The downside to this is that it is sensitive to the surface it is applied to. It won't stick to everything. On the other side, paint from a normal spray can is almost always oil-based. It is tough and resistant to most conditions. It can stick to almost every surface and will not come off easily. The issue here is that my water-based paint won't stick to any of this. I am now wasting my time here. Look at this. I spent time applying tape to the edges so I could create hard lines of paint. However, like a fool, past me is trying their best to airbrush over it. I remove the tape and apply the orange paint. I know the footage looks like it's working, but the camera I'm using is not of great quality. In the real world, the paint is sliding right off. Oh, past me noticed something isn't right? What do? They decide to apply another coat of spray paint, thinking that is going to resolve the issue. This time of an orange color. Onwards, they tried to airbrush one more time. I believe this was the moment past me realized that this wasn't working. After a bit of research, I realized my mistake. I did my best to remove the paint, but oil-based paint is so resistant. There is only one solution to this problem. Make a whole new one! This means another 26 hours of reprinting all three pieces, spending hours resanding everything, welding it all together, filler primer, and more high grit sanding? This took days, and my morale was shot the whole way through. After all that, we crawled our way back to where we left off. Now, I was a bit tilted at the whole situation. I had forgotten to record a bit of progress. Here, I have already applied a coat of dark brown paint from my airbrush, and I'm currently working on applying the orange color. After that, I add the final paint details such as the dark brown in the gaps and the yellow glow from the orbs on the bottom and the top of the amulet. I was running short on time since I wanted to have this ready for YCS Minneapolis, and I still had the entire arm guard I needed to print. So I decided that the paint job here was good enough. I took the last step and sprayed a glossy clear coat over it all. I decided on glossy because the close-up of the amulet in the alternate artwork has pretty reflective shine to it. Okay, just a few more things to do. I will admit, the mirror in the center was an afterthought. I had hoped I could find a cheap plastic mirror somewhere so I can cut it out and glue it in place, but I couldn't find one anywhere. I was suggested to get a sheet of pink reflective vinyl to place in there. After measuring out the cut, I went ahead and stuck it in place. Had I known that this was what I was going to be doing for the mirror, I would have taken a lot more time sanding the inside to have prevented a lot of these bumps on the reflection. Oh well, I'm not too beat up over it. The last thing to do was to attach the leather cord, and voila! It is done! Wow, what a journey this became. To remind everyone, I am new to the 3D printing scene. I had only printed 3 small objects before this one. I am very glad I could record the process, even though my recording quality wasn't the best. It was a load of fun, and I am excited to dive further into the hobby. I love 3D, and it is my goal to bring 3D to life in any way I can. Whether it be animations or printing, I will continue my passion. Thank you to everyone who watched this silly video of mine. To let those of you who are curious, I was indeed able to complete the whole Droll cosplay for YCS Minneapolis. The amulet was just one obstacle. I didn't even mention making the arm guard or even sewing the outfit together. However, like a true cosplayer, I got it all done literally the last hour before my friends picked me up for the road trip to the event. I wish I took more pictures of the cosplay though, as I only have these few to show. I'm sure I'll wear it to other events though. Now, what to make next? I'm open to suggestions. I'm looking for iconic Yugioh props that competitive players would recognize, preferably of meta relevance. Right now, there are a few that keep coming to mind. Not sure if I can handle the job right now, but I think it would be darn cool to make. And again, thank you for your time and have a wonderful day.